There we go. Right, so hello everybody who is watching us live and anyone who's watching on the recording. Thank you for joining us today. As always, I'm streaming through Zoom, so if you comment live, then I won't be able to answer live, but certainly will answer afterwards. But obviously, just ask any questions or make any comments or whatever as and when you feel it's necessary. So today we are talking the dark feminine, got it wrong, with my very good friend, Brigid Burke. Thank you very much for joining us, much appreciated. Lovely
to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the way in Cork right now, but all the way from the USA.
I'm in Drogheda right now, but yes, I was in Cork yesterday, so you're close. Yeah.
Where is it? Where are you now?
Just north of Dublin.
Oh, so. Okay. Oh, bloody hell. All right, you've gone up again.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So not in Cork then.
Yeah.
Oh God, honestly, I don't know where my head's at today. It's a nightmare. So we're going to be talking about the dark feminine today. So this isn't a subject that I'm particularly well versed in. I know bits and bobs. I probably know a bit more than I realise I do. But as you are obviously somebody who's got very in-depth knowledge of this subject, I'm really looking forward to this talk. So do you want to start by introducing yourself? Tell us what you do, who you are, what you love, who you serve, and all of that malarkey, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, okay, sure. I'm Brigid Burke, as you just said. I've been over here, I was actually, as you know, I was in England for 3 months, and now I'm in Ireland for 2. My background is, the main thing people know me for is the Catonia podcast. So that is, which has been running 3 years now. I just put out episode 80, which is kind of crazy.
I'll put the links to your podcast and everything else in the comments after we've done this as well, so that people can come and find you.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. So I do that. I have, like I said, my background right now, my main thing is I'm a teacher. I teach, university, Montclair State University in New Jersey. I teach myth, I teach religion, I teach the Trojan War. I teach all that kind of stuff because my background is Greek and Roman.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, I have, although you were just talking about who I serve, my 2 main areas, I have a tantric initiation. So I serve the goddess Kali and the matrikas and the mothers that are associated with her, the Mahavidyas and the matrikas. And I also, in part of the reason I'm in Ireland is I also serve the Morrigan. And the Morrigan has been around for me since probably 1988-ish. So it's been a long time. So I have this kind of background that, I feel that they're both very connected in a lot of ways. So I have those 2 things. I'm working on my 5th book now. The first one was academic book, which is actually on the subject called Death and the Maiden, which is a good, it's pretty dense read. I actually have a whole lecture series up on it now as well, that people can, if they go to my website, there's a free one up on YouTube for the intro, and then the rest of it is, people want to
I'm up for that.
Do go through the book and take the course, that they can do that, because a lot of people told me it's a good book, but it's a dense read.
So. It's heavy, yeah.
It's heavy.
But it's a big topic. It's a big topic, man. It's just, it's one of those things, but that's fabulous. Yeah.
That's the biggest introduction to what I'm about to talk about. But I've also got 1 short story collection, 2 fiction books. I'm working on 2 more fiction books, and I'm working on a book for Theon Publishing that's specifically on the Morrigan, not only from an academic standpoint, but also from a practical worship standpoint as well. So that's me.
And you read tarot,
and I do Reiki, and I do
Reiki, all of that.
I have transition life coaching. Yes, I do that on the side as well.
Yeah, all of that, and we go ghost hunting, which is
when in your area. Yes, we go ghost hunting. Yes,
we do. Deepest, darkest Kent, which is fabulous. So you've got a lot of feathers to your cap, so to speak. Fingers in lots and lots of pies. So it's brilliant. I think this is one of the reasons. Obviously, it's not the reason we're friends, but one of the greatest things, one of the things that I absolutely adore about you is the fact that you're so knowledgeable in so many different areas, and you have this obvious kind of like spiritual connection to the world, and upstairs, next door, downstairs, all of that malarkey, but also you're very, very firmly rooted in the academic. So it's kind of like there's that, it kind of like balances it out for me in terms of, I don't want to say credibility because I don't mean that, but let's say authority. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. So so it's really, really cool that you're going to be doing this with us today. So without further ado, let's get started. So do you want to give us a bit of an introduction, a brief introduction on the dark feminine from the top, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So yeah, I have my notes here. Take a look at those. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is when we talk about the feminine. Okay, that's probably the logical place to start, because a lot of people, when they think about the feminine, we think about women and women's issues, and certainly that's part of it. That's a very huge, big part of it. But when I think about the feminine, I'm thinking of it more on a macro level, I guess you could say. So I'm thinking about it more if we think of, for example, yin yang. Mm-hmm. And the idea of yin energy is, it's always been described as sort of passive, receptive, intuitive, emotional. These are all things that tend to be associated with the feminine. The feminine is idea of receiving, whereas we tend to think of the masculine or the yang energy as being rational, active, intellectual. It's more
analytical. Yeah,
right, exactly. It's all that kind of stuff, and it's and also we tend to associate more, action oriented, more aggressive, more, warlike energy and so forth. I have a dispute with that. We'll get to that. So that's certainly it's funny because yin yang, of course, is Chinese, or it's at least, from that area, the Taoist beliefs. But there is also a component of Eastern belief that, and that is within Hinduism in particular, and perhaps Buddhism, that says that the feminine is actually the active principle and the masculine is the passive one. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the idea of Shakti, the idea of your consciousness, your Kundalini consciousness, that rises up through the spinal column, that's the active Shakti energy. So that's the creative energy. The energy of the feminine is the active force, whereas like you see that image of the goddess Kali standing on top of Shiva. That's the representation of that. She's the active force. He's just passive. He's just laying out. So there's this idea of the feminine as being very, very active in that kind of a belief system. But I think it's also important to talk about way we construct the feminine in Western culture. Okay, because religiously there is a difference in how we think about these things. So first of all, when we think religion now, we tend to think of morals. Okay, we tend to think of ethics. You think of the God who is like this king who judges, and again, we're talking monotheism, talking Judaism, Christianity, Islam,
Abraham. Yeah,
and even those who are atheists, okay, even the atheists still kind of fall into that very, that kind of way of thinking about things, in that, particularly when I think about Christianity in the Protestant sense, where the idea is we take the scripture and we interpret the scripture and we look for evidence in scripture and we read things, in a very kind of rational, factual kind of a way, or at least that's what they're attempting to do with something, that's supposed to be very, very mysterious.
Yes, they're trying to rationalize and give it sort of a rigidity that it doesn't necessarily warrant.
Well, right, and it misses it. Like the one thing about, for all my complaints about Catholicism, one of the things about Catholicism is that they are very focused on liturgy, and that is the mysterious part, which ironically most Catholics, I'm walking around Ireland and I'm seeing all these little girls in their communion dresses, and I'm thinking, you're about to make a sacrament you'll probably never know the meaning of, because the Catholic Church doesn't encourage anybody to actually participate in the mystery part of it. That's only for the clergy, right? So, but nonetheless, it's still kind of there. Yeah. Okay, so it's within this Western conception that we have of femininity, and even Carl Jung falls prey to this, because Jung has a couple of main feminine archetypes. One is the mother, okay, and the other is the anima. Okay, and the anima is also known as the archetype of the soul, and that's kind of an important term for what I'm about to talk about, because we always tend to assume soul and spirit mean the same thing, but in this way of thinking, they're not. Okay, so when you think about the mother, that's the energy. Okay, so what are some of the things we associate it with? The idea of the woman as life bringer. Okay, she's the womb, she's the fertile one, or as Eric Neumann calls her, the great container. Okay, the idea of the fem. Yeah, and again, this is very archetypal, but it also does get down to the biology. You know what I mean? If you want to talk about quote unquote biological feminine.
Yeah.
So the woman, therefore, is the mother, and therefore she's the one that has the creative element, and then there's that nurturing aspect. to the mother. Okay, this is what we think about as the feminine ideal, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and the mother, of course, is always very good and is always very protective in the sense of wanting what's best for their child. And then in the family paradigm, the woman's seen as wife, right? And the wife who is obedient to her husband or submits to her husband. And then we see the girl who is not married or is premarital age as having to be sort of virginal and pure, the maiden, and to be protected, right? And also innocent.
Innocence.
So so this is all the components of what we tend to think of as the feminine. Now, again, there's people who may argue with that as an ideal, but I would suggest, and you might feel the same way, Lou. I mean, having lived a life as a woman, you know that there's certain expectations that are on you that people, and they may say, oh no, I don't subscribe to any of that, but it's still there. That's still the story.
Yes, I mean, it is, you know, the you know, these archetypes, they play out every single day. They're societal, you know, society doesn't necessarily think, individuals don't necessarily think that they are playing this stuff out, but they are
unconscious.
Yeah, it is. And we're all prone to it ourselves. Some of us, you know, we're guilty of it ourselves. Sometimes I make little judgments in my head and I think, hang on a minute, Louise, have a word with yourself, because I've done it, you know, because none of us are kind of like fallible. Do you know what I mean? We all absorb this stuff around us all the time. So it's kind of like, it's always there kind of as a blanket, kind of shrouding everything all the time. And it's only when you kind of part those clouds and see what's really going on there, you think, oh, holy fuck, you know, that's right. I mean, you've only got to look at Disney films, you've only got to look at art, you've only got to look at, you know, it's around. I mean, I know that, and those, you know, the paradigm is shifting somewhat now, but it's still very, very obvious.
Well, that's it. And the thing is about that is that, yeah, it's that's what I like to call a narrative. It's something that it's the script that everybody follows, and it's so inherent, it's so systemic that nobody knows that they're following it. It's kind of like what people talk about with racism too. It's just kind of like this idea that you are, and people go, well, you know, well, I'm not racist. And it's just kind of like, well, no, it's not about what you think. Like you can look and say, yes, I think women should, you know, be equal, or I think women shouldn't have to do this. But then when certain things happen, your responses to those things will tell you. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that.
Yeah. Okay. It's at a systemic level, and you know, a societal. Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Exactly.
It's not going to be you going off track. It's going to be me taking you off. Because me and you, this is just to let everyone else in on the kind of the thing. You know, you and I, we talk for hours and hours and hours, don't we? So it's just very tempting to kind of just go into a normal chat with you and be like, yeah, rah, rah, and I'll get on one and you'll be like, yeah, rah, rah. But that's not the purpose of this live today, so we'll save that for afterwards. But you have to stop me if I go off on a tangent. Bring me back.
Well, let's talk about the dark feminine then. Okay, so we just talked about kind of the feminine as a broader construct. Okay, so it's an archetypal construct, and then the way that ends up applying in the lives of women, or even people who identify as women, or as the concept of feminine, it tends to be tied around, there's really two main things that this pivots on, and that's sexuality and sovereignty. Okay? Those are the two pivots. Now, the dark feminine I can define as having to do, I kind of have three rough things that I talk about here. First of all, woman as connected to death or bringing death. Okay, so if woman is bringer of life, okay, and if we think about woman as connected to the earth, okay, we think about, we think about realizing the earth, like, for example, in ancient Egypt is masculine. For the most part, we tend to see the earth as feminine, okay? We tend to see, you know, Gaia, Mother Earth, right? And the reason for that is that the idea that you can plant seeds in the earth and they will bear fruit in the same way that you could potentially do a woman, and, you know,
yes, the earth is fertile. Yes, Mother Earth, isn't it? So
right, and there's a whole set of imagery that goes around that. But the earth is also the place when you're dead that they bury you. Okay, I mean, yes, people do get cremated and other stuff as well, but regardless, there's the idea that, you know, what's the old expression? You know, from dust you came, and to dust you shall return. I mean, there's this idea that you are, you know, there's this association of the feminine also with death as well as with bringing life. And that's the part that we don't like. That's the hag, that's the widow. That's the crone. yeah, the crone aspect, and also just the again, just this association. You have some of these dark goddess figures like Kali, for example, who is standing there with her sword ready to slash her head off. I mean, this dark feminine energy is very, very potent. Just like it can be the Shakti that brings you life, it's also the thing that can, you know, bring an end to something right away.
Yeah.
And I need not. Well, actually, I'm not going to go there yet. Okay, so woman as anima. Okay. Or as rather than the mother. Okay, that's the other aspect of the dark feminine, and it's the anima. You'll see this a lot. I did a few podcasts at the end of last year about like the Bavanshi and about these female vampire type figures. Okay, Lilith. Okay, Lilith is a good example. The idea of the feminine who's like the succubus, the one that is taking the, you know, that the man is like passionately devoted to, and the anima is just, you know, sucking the life out,
like a siren, you know, a siren, or like a
well, yes,
mermaids. And also what's coming to mind is there's I don't know if you've watched Love, Death and Robots, but there's an episode in season 3 that you will love, and I'll link you to it later, but there's a whole episode on this, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever watched. But anyway, but yeah, it's that kind of like, it's almost it's so powerful. It's such a powerful kind of it conjures up such powerful sort of emotions and images and stuff, doesn't it, in the sense that you have this kind of this beauty, or this, you know, it's kind of like, I can't really explain myself. You carry on and I'll think of what I'm trying to say. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. It's what it is. Well, okay, and that particular image, whether it be in folklore, whether it be in religion, whether it be in you know, in literature, in film, like you say, or TV shows, that image of the anima. I mean, now again, from a Jungian perspective, the anima is what replaces the mother in the male psyche. It's like that's the, you know, once they've disconnected from their mother and they become a grown-up, then their relationship to the feminine becomes this relationship to the anima, which can be very contentious, but it can also be very, very fruitful, because that engagement, the Circe or Kirke, the witch in the Odyssey, is a good example of that. Because what does she do when they come to the island? She turns all Odysseus's men into pigs, and she would do it to him too, except Hermes has given him a special, the moly plant, to keep him from, you know, being prey to her spells. So she changes tactics, and then she starts to work with him instead. So, and she's the one who enables him to go to the underworld, to get his prophecy, to tell him how to go back home. I mean, she's helpful, but she can also be very, very dangerous. So that's a good characterization of the anima. And the way that we tend to see that play out in the lives of women is this idea about the seductress, or the sexually promiscuous person, or the sexually the sexually independent woman, or the idea of the temptations of the flesh. Okay, so that's where this negative, you know, this idea of the woman as seductress, and which of course is a two-way thing, because obviously that's something that you know, people are drawn to, men are drawn to, right? But then it's the kind of thing also, it's kind of like, yes, but you should not be like that, right? Yeah,
it's funny because I saw a meme about this the other day, and it was about mermaids, and it's like, you know, poor mermaid's just sitting on a rock having a little sing, brushing her hair, and then all these blokes are coming along because they fancy her and they're drawn to her, and then she gets the blame for it. She's minding her own business. It's your fault that you decided to go over, and that you desire that was your desire that got you into trouble, not her getting. Do you know what I mean? It's I find it a fascinating and infuriating topic.
Well, but think about that too. If you think about rape narratives in culture, I mean, I hate to bring that up, but it's you know, what's frequently the thing that will happen? Something will happen to a girl or a woman, and then it will become, well, what was she wearing?
Yeah.
You know, did she come on? You know, what did she do? And to be fair, there are cases of women who get involved with somebody and then claim rape later. It's
less than 0.1% apparently of all reports. So
right, exactly. It's not like that is the norm. But
no, absolutely.
Even recognizing that. So, but there's still this narrative. If you watch these, John Oliver has his thing on sex education. He does that Last Week Tonight show that is in the States on HBO, and that one's usually you can find on YouTube. But it's on sex ed, and he talks about abstinence only education, which is a big thing in the US.
Yeah.
And the abstinence only education you listen to them and all they're talking about is, you know, girls who have sex are like a used piece of gum, and they're like an old piece of tape, and all of the things about teaching kids about abstinence is always about how she has to learn to say no, and he has to learn not to be tempted by her. And it's like, where's his responsibility come in? You know?
And also, I mean, comparing women continually to inanimate objects is just like, you know.
Well, that's
I'm a busted up old car, mate. You know, I'm not spoiled goods. Thank you very much. You know, some of that. And you know, false advertising, all of that nonsense. Honestly, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, yes, and I want to get to that too, because also, that's the ideal. There's still this ideal of virginity, especially for young people. It's or unmarried people. This virgin ideal, which goes back to the whole idea of women as property. You know, it's the idea that you are, you know, you get a better price for somebody who hasn't been with somebody else. You know,
who hasn't yet received.
Who is inexperienced, shall we say. But okay, so that's another piece of this, the woman who is sexually independent, takes charge of her own sexuality, and may be very sexy and want to engage, you know, however she wants to engage herself. I mean, the opposite can be true too. It can be a woman who's just like, you know,
she can do what she wants. That's the point, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And that's the piece, that's the third piece, that's sovereignty. Sovereignty is a woman's right to her own destiny, and particularly with respect to sexuality, but it also can have to do with, you know, it can just have to do with general sovereignty in life. You know, the idea that, no, your destiny is not to be married to somebody. I mean, I grew up in the 70s when that was still a thing, you know, and it was this whole idea that you would, you know, it was expected that you were going to get married. Those were the days when you couldn't get a credit card without your husband's permission, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just the idea that you don't have a right to your own sovereignty. And women who do want to have their own sovereignty. Now, again, we live in a 21st century society that says, yes, that's the way it should be. People should be self-determining and, you know, but you will see certain things that'll happen in certain narratives. What's happening in the US right now with abortion laws and stuff, where they've decided that this is not a private, that women don't have that right to privacy. It's not protected by the 14th Amendment. And I mean, this hasn't gone through yet, but that's the way they're rationalizing it. And that, of course, affects a lot of other people too. It affects gay marriage. It can even affect interracial marriage. It can affect all kinds of stuff. But this idea of, you know, you're not self-determining, and it always ends up becoming about, they flip it around and it becomes, well, you're the woman who's supposed to protect the child. So you're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to, you know, this is somehow your role. Biology is destiny, right? And so women who push back against that and who say, no, I'm going to be self-determining. And again, we always talk about that's a healthy thing. We want to teach girls to do this. I'm like, yeah, we do, but not when it comes to that, particularly not when it comes to the sexual stuff. Okay.
Yes.
That seems to be a thing. Okay. So the dark feminine is kind of all of those things. It's that connection to the death and destruction that people are very afraid of. And I will bring in Freud's castration anxiety there, because I think that there may, you know, as much as we've discounted a lot of Freud, I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
The woman as the anima figure, as the, you know, and then the woman is self-determining. Okay. So all of these are part of the dark feminine. Now, here's where the problems come in. I've thinking about this, I can see 4 different narrative problems. Okay, first of all, we still have this cultural interpretation of the Adam and Eve story in Genesis 1. Okay, so the way that story is typically interpreted, and it's not the way I interpret it, but it's the typical way, is that that this man and this woman were made. Eve is made as this helpmate for Adam. If you put the Lilith story aside, which is not in the Bible, it's in the Talmud, but if you just look at the idea that she was somehow taken from Adam's rib or whatever. And there's this idea that they're in the garden and they're told not to do one thing. Now, by the way, in folklore, that's a motif, the one forbidden thing. You know, you don't violate the one forbidden thing. You know, Bluebeard, don't look in that closet, right?
It's everywhere. It's in films, isn't it? It's, you know, there's always one thing that you're not meant to do. You don't,
and of course you do it.
Of course, that's the whole point of the story. That's you know.
Yeah, you do it.
If the story played out and they just went, oh, all right then, and didn't do it, like it wouldn't make for a yarn.
Well, I was told to stay away from that. Well, I guess I will. Yeah, it's yeah, no, the whole point is that you need to push beyond the forbidden boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the way that the story plays out is that this was an act of disobedience by Samael or Satan or whoever, you know, as a serpent. Now, the serpent, of course, represents life, but and to me, that story is about, this is how we come into the field of time. This is how we come into space and time. You have to. That's why the serpent's involved, because the serpent represents the circularity of time, right?
I can never say
Ouroboros, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
can't say
Ouroboros. Ouroboros, yeah. And so what ends up happening is so there's this act of disobedience. But the act of disobedience has to happen if you want to have life, because the field of the Garden of Eden is the field of eternity, right? There's no, they're just kind of wandering around the garden with Jehovah or Yahweh. You know, they're not, this is not a real, they don't even know that they're different. See, that the tree that they eat from is the knowledge of good and evil, right? It's a knowledge of opposites. And in order to function in the world, you can't, we always talk about everything being one. It's like, you can't function like that. You need to be able to see things as separate. I need to see myself as separate from you, and my window over there is separate from me, and this is over here. Otherwise your mind can't take the idea of everything being unified.
It's like living in an echo chamber, or like the whole was it Plato's
cave
with the cave,
yeah, there's this idea that but to me, okay, and Eve, of course, is the one who does it, because women is the one who brings life into the world, right? But the way that story is typically interpreted is that she did a bad thing, and she needs to be punished for it, because obviously she was so weak and so stupid that she couldn't resist the serpent, right? Yeah. Of course, nobody asked Adam. He might have done the same thing. You don't even know.
He was too busy sitting with his dick in his hand, probably.
But no, apparently he didn't even know he had one. See, that's the story. If you read what it says as soon as they both ate the fruit, they noticed that they were naked, and they covered their shame, and it's already referred to as shame. It's referred to as shame, and that passage dictates this Western idea towards sexuality. It's shame. It's shame. Living in this world is shame. Engaging in this whole process the natural process is somehow wrong.
And then it's loss of innocence as well. So I suppose that, that loss of innocence then goes back to the archetype of the virginal maiden as well, because that, the innocence is revered, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and then you can get to the whole Persephone myth, and that's another whole subject. We're not going to have time for that in this one, but the Persephone myth, yeah, but that's another one. And so yeah, so okay, so you've got this idea. So you from at least one of the outcomes of this, another outcome of this is the way that we treat the earth in general, because then we tend to view nature as somehow a mistake and needing to be corrected in some fashion by some savior figure person who's going to take you out of this world, which is obviously terrible, right? And even the Gnostics have that kind of idea that this is that the world is somehow either a mistake, or it's imperfect, or it's been ruined, or it's been corrupted, it's sinful, right? Yeah. So, and it's like Joseph Campbell said at one time, he says, then every natural impulse becomes a sin. So, and of course, if you're associating the feminine with that sexual energy and so forth, then this also becomes a reflection on it's not surprising that this is the interpretation that they come up with, given that idea. Yeah. Okay. The other problem that I have, that's one piece, okay, and that definitely, and I don't care if somebody is, like I said, I don't care if somebody's an atheist. That story still influences them, because there's still this idea that somehow man, okay, I'm just going to use the word man, is in control of nature, and because we're rational and because we're smart, we can correct nature. We can come in and yes, this is wrong, but we can fix it. It's and so this has led to this whole idea of that we're smarter than nature. Okay? Yeah, and that's still an issue, even if you are completely non-religious and don't follow any of that. Okay. So, all right. So the okay, then there's this other mythology, which I'm sure you have heard of the matriarchy, and that is the idea that thousands and thousands of years ago, people only worshipped the Great Mother, and it was just a wonderful, happy, and peaceful time. You know, everybody just loved each other, and there was no war. And then these terrible patriarchs, usually from somewhere in Russia, come flying in, and they populate, and then they bring war, and they bring all this terrible stuff, and now we have patriarchy, and isn't that a shame? And it's something a lot of people, even a lot of people in the witch community, a lot of people still subscribe to that theory. I mean, even I've heard things even very, very recently about, oh yes, that original time when everybody worshiped the mother and everything was great. And I have to say, I'm like, not exactly, because the time when people worship the mother, what we know about Kybele or worship, what we know about the Cappadocian, what we know about the worship of these really ancient female divinities is that they usually involve blood sacrifice and castration. Yeah. So no, they're not. They're not necessarily the idea that somehow this was a peaceful society. And that also leads into my point that women are actually should be more associated with war than men, because women are, you frequently see love goddesses, female love goddesses, but they are also, Babylonian Ishtar, for example, she's also a war goddess. Yeah. You think about Aphrodite. Aphrodite is the cause of the Trojan War. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's because it has to do with the passions. It has to do with the way in which we either want too much of something, too much of the material world. I'm greedy. I'm going to steal your territory, or I'm going to steal your, wife, or your this, or whatever. And you start to have these disputes that lead to war. So, and you frequently have war goddesses. In ancient Greece, Athena is a much better fighter than Ares. Yeah, I mean, Ares is the god of war, but she is a goddess of war. And when you see the two of them go at it, she always beats him because she's smarter. She goes about it in a lot smarter way than he does. Yeah. So, woman. Yeah, because but love and war are intimately very much connected there. It's a very active kind of a thing. So I'm not, whether there was originally a matriarchy, we really don't know. The evidence could go either way, is the way, my friend Cynthia Eller had written a book, called, what was it? I think it's called The Myth of the Matriarchy. Anyways, I remember the subtitle was why an invented past won't give women a future. And her point in that book was that by going back to this, it's the same thing I've just said. When you go back to this idea of, that the peaceful, sweet mother who's loving and protective and nurturing, she's, then it becomes this idea that if you don't live up to that ideal, that somehow you're not a real woman, or you're a woman who engages in bad behavior, or you know what I mean? Oh, yeah, I mean, you could use me or you as an example in this very, obviously with me, never wanted to get married, never wanted children, right? Me neither. Alone. I've got absolutely no desire to meet a fella or anything else, but I'm not averse to having the odd dalliance here and there, but that doesn't make me a bad person. However, I am frowned upon by several different people. Some people don't care, which is brilliant. I've got a lot of good friends, but even the difference between like my mum and dad, like my mum, she might roll her eyes, but my dad, Christ, he would not be happy if he knew half of what I got up to. Whereas my mum pretty much knows everything, and she's like, but it's not, it's done with that. It's done with no judgment. Let's say she's not judging me. It's just that she can't imagine herself. She wouldn't do it herself, right? Right, exactly. So, well, and actually, it's good that you bring that up, because that segues into the next thing, next problem that I was talking about, which is the idea of subverting sexuality in the name of protection. Mm-hmm. Now, people who are mothers who are listening to this, or parents, probably are going to take issue with me on this, and I recognize some of the complaints about that. You know what I mean? I understand, like, if you're a parent, you want to protect your children. I get it. Course, yeah. I'm not. But there's frequently this idea that girls, let's just say teenage girls, I'm not prepubescent. No, I mean, no, you're not even talking somebody who's biologically, no. Mm-hmm. Okay. But when you're talking about somebody who has, who's hit menarche, who has, now is getting a period, who has, who's sprouted into womanhood, right? When you reach that stage, you have desires. Okay. You have desires. And there are frequently laws and things that are in place that are to protect girls at that age from being exploited. Okay, that's always the term, groomed, exploited. Now, there are men out there who do that, so I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Okay, however, I think about a case like, okay, in the United States, there are sex offender laws. And one of them is that, if somebody who is, so there's a statutory rape, right? So if a man who's a legal adult has sex with a girl who's not.
Which we have statutory rape here as well, I think, laws.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, you definitely do, but the question is whether or not the person is put on a sex offender list for the rest of their life.
Yes, I don't believe they are here.
Yeah, and that's what happens there. So I'm thinking, so you may think, well, yes, of course, because if an older man like takes advantage of a younger woman, but then first of all, there's the takes advantage. I'm like, okay, there are cases where a girl knows exactly what she's walking into, and people will say, yes, but she doesn't have the maturity. And I said, yes, but I know people your age and my age who also don't have the maturity. Yeah. Okay, so it's, to me, I don't know about that. So I'm just putting that there.
Yeah.
So but then I also think about the case of, okay, if you have an 18-year-old guy, okay, 18 is legal adult age, right? And his girlfriend's 17 and they have sex and they get caught, he's on a sex offender list for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Is he a sex offender? I don't think so.
No.
So there's this whole thing. To me, it's just my difficulty with it. And again, understanding parents and wanting to protect their kids and everything, I'm not gainsaying any of that, but and it doesn't necessarily mean it's smart for people that age to get involved, but it's just, but nonetheless, it's kind of like you try to control the desire by saying you just don't do it. And if you're doing it, somehow it's her fault. Or now what the narrative is, people are just flipping it around and saying, no, it's his fault because he's supposed to know better. And he's a monster who's exploiting this innocent little girl who doesn't know what she's doing. And that narrative I have a problem with too, because I'm like, but she does know what she's doing. You know what I mean? A lot of the time she does know.
When I was younger, I certainly knew what I was doing.
Yeah, me too.
So,
I mean,
but equally there are examples where, and I will be blunt here, I have had experiences when I was younger. I also had experiences where I was coerced, or I was, there were, it's very,
we all had them.
It's extremely problematic, let's say. But equally, I also had experiences that were completely and utterly up to me at that point in time. It's just, I think that the issue comes from the archetypical thing and the blanket assumption that there's one rule. I mean, and then actually making that like a legally kind of, a legal thing, that then throws up a load more problems, because there are going to be people that suffer for the rest of their lives because they made quite frankly an innocent mistake, or like you say, if there's a 17-year-old, 18-year-old guy and a 17-year-old girl, well, if they're going to do what they want to do, then they're going to do it, and it's not right. It's yeah. So I mean,
there's the whole thing about,
how I feel about America's laws anyway, but
you know how I feel about America's laws,
right?
But see, okay. So, but that's where the line is, and again, but this is where we're kind of getting into the moral and legal side of it. Right now, I'm kind of trying to pull the moral piece. I mean, the moral piece of it is the complicated one, and the legal. But if you push that aside for a moment, and if you just look at this, because certainly when you were looking at it in terms of the way the ancients did, but before the kind of before ethics became kind of the norm in thinking, like this is usually post-Plato is usually when we see that. We're not talking even in moral terms. So I'm just saying in purely amoral terms.
Yeah.
There's an urge there. And the idea is, the question becomes whether or not one should experiment with that urge, or does one save themselves for marriage? I mean, you can go to extremes with that. I mean, and there's, but again, that to me, that gets back to sovereignty. And my problem with always assuming that girls are just innocent and stupid and don't know what they're doing, to me, that also disenfranchises what the girl wants. And then it becomes, that's a tricky one. Again, in terms of legally, it's not like I'm making a suggestion here, like, oh, let's change all the laws so that 13-year-olds.
No. I think, I mean, the question really boils down to at what age of my life, when I was hoeing around, did people stop thinking that I was being taken advantage of, and that actually I was just doing what I wanted to do?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Like, when did I cross that point into
and where is what is
wants versus
and what is
just being exploited? Who knows?
Right. And that's just it. It's is
I think it was about 30 years old, I reckon. Since 30 plus, no one's questioned me.
Mm-hmm.
But pre-30, everyone had a problem with it. So actually, I think it does. I think there is a bit of vast age element there.
Right. And the question does become, the answer might be that it might be different for every person, because, there may be some people who are equipped to handle that and some who are not, which is why they always say good sex education is actually.
I mean, the judgment or the attitude from other people, let's say, rather than that upon yourself,
Right, exactly. And it becomes the thing, but it's just interesting how the way that it's changed is now it's become a judgment on the man. So you look at, say, rock stars from the 70s, okay? I mean, there's no way that those girls who went there didn't want to be there, okay? And their parents were perfectly fine with it too. It was kind of funny. They were there, and it's funny, as grown-ups, they'll go, oh yeah, that was great. I don't know if I want my daughter to do it. It was great. Yeah.
But that's exactly it. And that's exactly it.
But now the modern thing is, I was talking to somebody recently about celebrities now. Like, if you think about celebrities and the kinds of correspondence they had gotten maybe back in the 70s about girls who are like, oh my God, loved you. Now when they get correspondence, it's more in the case of, please don't do anything to get yourself canceled.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? So it's automatically assumed that the person in that position now has this huge moral responsibility. And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I understand both sides of the issue, but I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. They're under a moral obligation to be, to do the right thing all the time, but actually they're just human beings that have found themselves in the throng of, in the public's eye, and they're going to fuck up. We're all human beings.
Well, or even, but are they? And my question is, are they even fucking up? I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, no, that's what I mean. They're not. They don't want to say what they want to say. They're allowed to say. It's the fact that they are, because it's the idol, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So, and again, it boils down to the expectation placed upon the person that is there, the societal expectation, yet again.
Well, that's it. And it's, that's like almost like, that's still an anonymous thing, because it's just kind of like that larger than life male or female image or whatever is projected onto that individual, whatever those qualities are. And it's very hard. You can't just rationally disentangle yourself from that very easily.
No, absolutely.
So, so it's an interesting question. I don't know. It's just something that I've thought about when it comes to sovereignty. I'm like, I don't know that we're doing people a favor by saying, well, now all the men are the jerks here.
Yeah, no, it's too black and white. There is no, it doesn't work like that.
And it plays into the same narrative. That's my thing. And I'm kind of like, there needs to be some rethinking of that there. So, okay. So that's another thing that I see that's going on. There's still this very much this focus on girls as being innocent, virginal, and weak. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like, yes, but there's this other side, and there just seems to be this great determination to keep that other side under control. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a lot of this seems to be, particularly female sexuality, seems to be a terrifying thing, that people have to make laws to regulate that. And people, but it's not, they need to, and it's just kind of like, well, why is that so fundamentally important? Why is a female important that I get to a certain age and not have had sex? But at the same time, as I think it was Ariel Levy, she had a book called Female Chauvinist Pigs. It's an interesting book that I read a long time ago. And she says, the message is be as sexy as you possibly can be, but don't have sex.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, yeah. So it's just kind of like, well, what is it?
So it brings to mind.
Yeah, and also it's the objectification thing again too. Yeah, which again, I don't know that I have some kind of a strong positive or negative judgment on these things. These are things that we do in our human psyche with the psychology, but it's just kind of our responses to it. And I said, are our responses actually responses that lead to sovereignty, and that they actually lead to that kind of independent way of thinking? So I don't know. Katonia explores all of these questions, and that's my interest in the dark feminine, that piece that people don't want to talk about, that piece that people find frightening. One of the novels I'm rewriting right now, or writing for myself right now, is another Hades and Persephone reworking, because the way I read that story in the ancient Greek is that, you know, people always say Persephone, yeah, she was the rape of Persephone, you know, she's carried off and she's this terrible man, you know, Hades carries her off, and how awful it is. But from what I'm seeing, from what I'm reading, I'm like, yeah, she may have been carried off, but in the end it was kind of like, well, I kind of like my husband now. He tricked me into it. I like him now, you know? I mean, she was like, she actually says at the end, well, my husband tricked me and now I'm in love with him. Yeah. She just tell her, that's what she tells her mother. Of course, that's what you tell your mother. It's the same thing you're just talking about now. You're not going to tell your mother. I mean, or you're going to tell your parents. You're going to be like, no, listen, me. I don't think that way, you know? So
it's such a fascinating topic. And then I think that what it kind of then comes to, talking to my mother, she's just messaged me. It kind of then comes to the inner workings, you know, how you feel about yourself. And, you know, something that me and you have talked about several times is the whole love and light type thing. So when we say the dark feminine, I often think about, you know, the darker sides of what we deem the darker sides of being a woman. So all of these things that we've just been talking about,
and things you're not allowed to talk about.
Yeah, and then how they play out in our internal dialogue. And so you know, because we're not meant to be that way inclined. So let's say, like for me, I'm quite aggressive. I've got quite an aggressive nature, but that's not very ladylike, is it? So
right,
I dampen myself. So, you know, so I can't be passionate Louise, because I'm always, you know, well, I've been told historically that it's not very ladylike, and I feel like, well, and I've always been told I'm a tomboy, and I've been called a mushmalt, which won't make any sense to you, but for our British people, they'll understand what I'm saying, and all of these things. And I think, no, I'm not a bloke, I'm not a ladette, I'm not a blokey girl, I am a woman, and I'm expressing all sides of myself as the feminine,
which are part of the feminine. They're not masculine. They're
right.
Part of
I know feminine. That's what I'm saying, right? And but so when it comes to the internal side of things, these conversations are really, really important to have, because I think it can really have a massive impact on how we view ourselves, and you know, even as far as our self-esteem, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because that's the thing, because a lot of times we do hold back because we should be ashamed of something. Well, that's usually also dark. It's what's in shadow, right? The things that you perceive as being a weakness or something you can't show to somebody. And you know, and so then the question just becomes, I mean, like, what now? I mean, I'm 50 years old now, so to me, I'm just like, yeah, you don't like it, you know, whatever. You know, yeah, I'm
getting there. Like, you know, I mean, obviously the last couple of years or so, but since I've hit 40, which has only been since February, I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just kind of reach a point, you do things and you think, oh, you know, because women do. A lot of times it's the way they're driven psychologically, is to kind of stop and say, well, how are people going to judge me for this?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's part of, you know, me turning 40 particularly, is it's a sigh of relief, because now I'm a spinster. Yes, no one's now going to ask me when I'm getting married, because I'm past it. I'm on the shelf. No one's going to ask me when I'm going to have a baby. Oh, no, because I'm 40, you know. So the expectation, the societal expectations have kind of been like pretty much lifted now. I'm like, woof, right, can I just live my life now? Thank you very much, you know.
Right, exactly, yeah.
It's very liberating.
But I still know people. I still have people I know who will just be like, "Oh, you never had children." I'm like,
yeah,
and and you did. I'm sorry.
No, I saw a thing online the other day. Somebody said that it was their, I don't know, their aunt, somebody used to answer when someone would say like, "Oh, how come you never got married?" And she'd say, "Oh, just lucky, I guess."
Pretty much, yeah. It's just, I mean, again, I mean, there's people who are happily married and have kids and are happy. Great,
yeah,
you know, I'm not. It's a matter, but it's sovereignty. Is that what you want?
That's exactly it. And it, you know, when it comes to, you know, obviously I'm feminist and everything else. Do you know what? If a woman wants to have children, get married and stay at home and bake and do the housework, if she has made that choice, she is a feminist, right? Yeah. She can do what she damn well pleases. You don't have to be, you can, the whole point is that you are able to make your own, you have that independence, you can make your own decisions, and you do, you know, you're not playing things out because you have to, you know, whatever you want to do. It's the freedom to have the choice. That is what it boils down to. Right. And it's very difficult when we have these, you know, everybody's playing into these narratives, because you think that you're doing things that you want, but actually sometimes you find that you've been caught
You're
up.
following the script.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that is always the easiest thing to do. And I'm not going to trash anybody who does. I mean, if that's the way, if they're all right with that, but people who feel like, well, you know, I want to live life on my own terms, then they may not want to choose that script. And a lot of people don't, because there's a lot of issues with that script, you know?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Brilliant. So I'll just clap again for the castration. That was funny. Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I'm going to stop because I could just.
We could go on for a long time. Yeah.
Oh, we really could, couldn't we? We might have to do a reprise of this at some point. To be like, right, let's.
We'll take another angle of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We could go into like minute detail and sort of wax lyrical over just, you know, one area. It's a huge subject, and
massive.
It's, and massively important as well. And I think that we all kind of need to just become more aware of the fact that, you know, these narratives, these constructs are there, and we need to kind of just have a little word with ourselves and assess how much we are willingly or knowingly playing into those things, and how much is really us and how much is really just kind of what we think is expected of us, without, you know, consciously being aware of it. And I think, you know, it gives us all a start, a starting point at least to try and perhaps change ourselves in a way, if we want to, change our lives, you know, for the better, if we want to.
But I have run into women who have, people have contacted me at different times and different things who, I mean, I think it's a narrative people need to hear. I've heard about people being in abusive relationships, and then once they hear that narrative, they're like, wait, maybe I don't have to stay here. Maybe this isn't my fault. Maybe I don't have to. I mean, those kind of things are the most satisfying to me, you know, because I say, yeah, okay, so I'm saying this to you and it's making a difference in your life. And that's the important thing.
A positive one. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. All right then, Bridge. Well, what I'll do, I will chuck your links in the comments here. Anybody who is watching, who has stayed with us, thank you very much. And yeah, any questions for me or Bridge, then pop them in the comments. Do you know what? That was actually grapefruit juice with like fizzy water in it, and I feel like I'm drunk. Does grapefruit juice affect antibiotics?
Not that I know of. I could be wrong, but I mean,
I feel really like sort of spaced out. It's really weird. So yeah, anyway, no. It's just I won't put this on YouTube, I'll clip this bit. But yeah, so anyone's got any questions or anything, let us know. Thank you very much. And yeah, love you millions. I'm going to end the live stream there.
Okay, bye.
And I'm going to